So the way this one's going to work this morning is I'm probably actually going to do this one multiple times. This is going to be the first take at 7:30 in the morning, and or it might be 8. Um, I'm going to run through something that I wrote. It's called "Lynch the Supreme Court," and that's suggestive. And the title is a summation. And but at the same time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect this to the whole transport of nuclear material through a community of United States citizens who have no due recourse to stop it other than honestly violence. And I would like to note that despite the FBI citing anybody that advocates systematic violence as a threat to national security, that and the fact that I've openly admitted that this stratagem right here of moving nuclearly contaminated dirt through a community was a plot that I had devised over 2 years ago, or maybe even just a year, to implement against downtown Los Angeles in retaliation for what I consider to be the murder of my family members, through not only the complicity of silence in the community, but local officials, Los Angeles officials, and California officials, and blah 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 blah. And not to mention the police station is down there too, and the police are highly involved in this because again, the area in which this dirt is now going to be transported is the highest densely populated city in the country with police. So this is going to get into this. I don't know what this is going to be, but I want you to know that all that other stuff that is in one sense juvenalistic threats of rage and blah 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 blah, uh, but as you can see, is according to them is not criminal and is naive because they're going to do it anyways. So one, I can't be indicted on a nuclear plot, a plotted nuclear attack on United States citizens by means of the way that I publicly and posted it on my website and everything and my before, because they're going to do it, and that would be an admission of guilt. So intent, but they might say 90% of intent because I listened to a speech from the FBI Corley and his justification for the FBI not indicting any of the financial institutions that were complicit in the crisis is that ignorance or stupidity is not a crime, and therefore, even if people get hurt. So that was his verbatim quote from a speech that he just gave at the New York Bar Association. And he is a lawyer. He is a associate of the bar still, and he was a attorney general for them. So we're going to get into this crap. And on that note is that all that, and I wrote Lynch the Supreme Court, which is the piece that I'm going to be basing this kind of building off of, and that's in what you call it, advocacy of organized and systematic violence, because at the end of the paper I submit, yes, they should the Supreme Court justices should be lynched, and they preferably, if my preference, it should be a noose that has 13 loops around it, which is a significant number, which is the way that they lynched black people in the South. But the one difference is that I say it should be only one noose, not everybody get their own. It should be back to back, and that it should be a barbed wire. So, but all of that violence and stuff like that is not as prosecutable as the fact that I am asserting RICO allegations against the judges, California officials, Los Angeles officials, the Supreme Court, and again the FBI director, and all blah blah blah, and the NRC. The NRC is very important in this. I want you to bear in mind in going into this that when Fukushima happened, the NRC boasted arrogantly and with mass amount of hubris that where the Japanese government was being criticized, the NRC, which is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission of the United States, claimed that the United States policies in such an event, because when Fukushima first happened, they said there was a non-event. They didn't. This was, but according, I'm talking to peons, so it doesn't really matter. But when Fukushima first happened, they said it was a non-event. It was no big deal. But still, the NRC said under these situations, this was the head of the spokesperson for the NRC, and I forgot his name, but that's okay. I'm not trying to prove anything. Oh, well, if this was something, if this event, even though this event couldn't happen in the United States, if something like this event would happen in the United States, the NRC's policy would be to create a quarantine section to evacuate 50-mile radius from the incident. And again, we're discussing, in one sense, the fourth, according to the IAEA, the United Nations, and Dwight Eisenhower's, to be fair and true, Atomic International Atomic Energy Association agency. They still cite to this day the incident at hand as the fourth biggest nuclear accident in history, right after 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima being number one. So, 50-mile radius. So remember that they're in this whole thing too. One thing I want to note in getting into this whole RICO stuff is that in the California, the difference each state was allowed to do their own RICO stuff afterwards because states want to. It's a uncertainty. Where the law is uncertain, there is no law, is the essence of all legal matters. Therefore, when you differentiate between federal and state laws, and then between state and state laws, and then whatnot, what you end up getting, and in some cases between municipal and state laws, what you end up getting is you get uncertainty that is left to mere opinion, and this is why you see this language that is used in all of these, the opinion of the court. The language suggests the lower courts. It's all very. We now agree. As ordinary English reads, we conclude. We must. So all of these things are a greater scheme of RICO. But I mean, again, can't convince a patriot. Anyway, so let's get into this. We're gonna start here. And this is, okay. In reply, King argues that the lower court's rule is consistent with, 1, the principle that a corporation acts only through its directors, officers, and agents. 2, the principle that a corporation should not be liable for the criminal acts of its employees where Congress so intends. Brief on respondent. Okay, I think it goes down here. Holding that. Okay, it does not assert that ordinary respondent superior principles make a corporation legally liable under RICO for the criminal acts of its employees. That is a matter of congressional intent, not before us. Holding that corporations cannot be vicariously liable for violations committed by its vice president. Neither is it consistent with antitrust laws and intra-corporate conspiracy doctrine. That doctrine turns on specific antitrust objectives. Rather, we hold simply that the need for two distinct entities is satisfied. Hence, the RICO provision before us applies when a corporate employee unlawfully conducts the affairs of the corporation of which he is the sole owner, whether he conducts those affairs within the scope or beyond the scope of corporate authority. But anyways, there's more, but that's fine. So what I get into this is 4. Okay, the foci of this writing. Okay, the foci of this writing is in, quote unquote, the court's application of 4. That's right there, right after 166.4. Emphasis mine. It is my intention to incriminate the court as the epicenter for, while massive in legacy and current activities, is just a variation of elements that clearly identify an enterprise of international racketeering for the sake of vernacular familiarity, henceforth referred to as a RICO. I believe these charges evident in the gross depravity that is currently, based on pure statistics, manifested in the prominent experience of the American citizens' day-to-day debt activities on unlawful debt. Such activities that in no indirect means have resulted in the deaths, murders, as of many of 10 million United States citizens since World War II. And actually, you could probably pick any decade in between then. I would say from 1980 till now, you could pick any decade, and I can prove to you that the Supreme Court's decisions are directly can be directly implicated in the deaths of at least 5 million Americans in every decade, and minimum 10 million, minimum 15 million in this first decade of the new millennium. As such, I believe that this piece, under the power of justice that transcends human understanding or certainty, proves that the court is immediately deservable of execution by any means the public deems fit. The intent of this claims towards the outcome is to apply shock and awe to the peons of this RICO. Peonage is an act of it. Of this RICO enterprise, such as to use the head of the attempt of this is to use the head of Medusa against the Hydra for its utter demise in totality through and through, to decimate it, the court, and, ergo, in other words, the enterprise. It should be noted that any entity that has drawn its power from the enterprise by virtue of, quote unquote, to err is human, because of the uncertainty and all this opinion, cannot be the agent to administer the required justice, but will, as an independently vicious head of the Hydra enterprise, quote or parentheses, enterprise, with as much a survival instinct as the court, the actual body or means of functioning RICO, will resort to as much violence as their purview based on the relationship to the enterprise tells them they must need apply for the preservation of this enterprise. That would otherwise render them, as asserted in court's precedents and the foci of the accumulation of coercive tools and behavior, powerless over the court's intended victims, namely the general public, both United States and international, or human, or not even human. Well, I have to use human, but that's a whole other thing. That is to say that there will be no savior nor messiah to intervene on the trend of decline of living conditions for the general species that matches the advancement of markets and property rights, particularly human rights, as human by definition is not a living being as implied in plain speaking English, but that of man, asserting ownership value to be possessed as much as controlled or contended over. Hue being to deceive, direct translation. Enough rabble rousing onward to the war against this poly-headed beast. 2. So we're going to focus right here. 2. The principle that the corporation should not be liable for criminal acts of its employees where Congress so intends. The court applies 4. With the intent to codify the enterprise's activities. Read as ordinary English, quote attributed to Justice Breyer, who used the court's opinion in this same case. Otherwise, RICO, by creating distance, 2 points, implying a relationship, the court claims to be uncertain of the inevitable product, meaning that by using the word for, the court creates separation. Okay. Man, this fucking phone. Okay, that is to say, to expand or intensify the allotted power or scope of the violence granted any agent or enterprise, i.e. the CIA, NSA,